for attending our first virtual networking event here at the Toronto Transportation Club. We call it Connect. And if this goes well and have good response and feedback, we'll do more of these hopefully in the days ahead. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jeff Priest. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Bison Transport. 21 years with our business, and most of that time in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but more recently in the last 4 years based here in Mississauga. I'm speaking to you today from Bison's office in Mississauga. I joined the Toronto Transportation Club Board of Directors in fall of 2019, and I'd like to show you why. And if you could cue the slide deck there, Carlos, please. I'd like to show you why. The Toronto Transportation Club is all about learning and connecting. And these are a couple of pictures, this one and maybe go to the next one, of our Toronto Transportation Club annual dinner. This was held in November of 2019, where well over 1,000 people from the Ontario area mostly gathered together for a great night of networking and connecting. Next slide. Here's one of me with John Montgomery, gold medalist in the 2010 Winter Olympics. He shared his gold medal with me only for a moment. He was our featured speaker at the event. And maybe one more slide I'll show the audience. Got some strange guy in a very odd colored vest. I'm not sure if he's colorblind or not. And I'm not sure how he connected to this beautiful gal to the right, but she must be his daughter. And actually, that is in fact the case. This is one of our panelists, esteemed and popular Al Boughton, and his daughter Stacey Carroll, who's also on the Toronto Transportation Club Board of Directors. Thank you, Carlos. So if we could jump back, yes, thank you. So at an annual event like that, like I just showed you, what typically happens? Well, two things happen. Actually, lots of things happen because it's quite a party, but two things happen. One is we learn. We learn from each other. We learn from featured speakers. Two, we connect. We connect with others and we build our network accordingly. Thankfully, technology has enabled us to connect and learn today, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic. So I would like to encourage everybody who's participating, there's a large group that are on the call here with us, to learn. We've got industry leaders, listen, learn, ask questions. I'll direct you to the chat, or rather the Q&A portion of the Zoom meeting. You have an option to send direct questions. You can direct them to an individual panelist or to the group of panelists, but use the Q&A. We will get to your questions and look for themes and respond accordingly. So this is a great opportunity to learn. Secondly, I'd like to encourage you to connect. So by connecting, it's been a while since a lot of us got together with each other, of course. This Zoom has some really great tools for doing just that. You can view the attendee list, scroll through it. If you want to do that during the call, send a private message to somebody who you know but haven't connected with in a long time. That's also what this is about. You don't just need to stay and listen to the dialogue. I would encourage you to find ways to connect, because there's people in this virtual room that you want to say hi to, and continue to build your network accordingly. So with those opening comments, I'd like to take a few minutes and give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves. Before we get to the panelists, though, I'll just make a quick couple of comments about the participants who we can't see on the screen but are there in this room with us. So we have 175 people registered for this event, which we're very, very pleased with, and I expect the number to grow. I see we're at about 94 participants have signed on right now. That list of attendees or participants is a healthy balance of shippers and carriers, road, rail, definitely associated trades, some third parties. So there's a great balance of folk from the transportation industry represented here. Geographically, Most appear to be from the GTA in Ontario, not surprisingly, of course, but we even have a few from the West, Western Canada, that is. I think there's some from Quebec and a handful from the US. So thank you for being, for taking time during your day to be here and participate. We're here only because you are here. So you are very, very important to us. So in asking the panelists to introduce themselves, I'm going to basically ask them to say three things. Who are you? Tell us a quick COVID story, something you got good at or worse at during COVID time, and a stock that you think is worth watching. And you don't have to explain why. And Dan, you can't say CN. All right, so we'll start off with, let's start with Ken Coffin. Why don't you go ahead and then go from there, folks.
Perfect. Thank you very much there, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ken Coffin, and if you don't notice by the paraphernalia around myself, I work with Canadian Tire. My role is the Associate Vice President for Domestic Operations. Primary accountability is for all freight movement within Canada. If it hits a rail terminal and or hits one of our vendors, domestic vendors, and or our DCs, my responsibility is from that origin to destination. We have 1,700 retail sites across Canada, which most prominently is our CTR retail stores. Those are the big Canadian Tire stores. But for those of you who may not know, we also own Marks, Sports Check, Sport Expert in Quebec, which is a franchise group, Part Source, Pro Hockey Life, National Sports, as well as coming this fall, we have Party City, 65 stores across Canada that'll be joining us. So it's a pleasure. I've got a great team working here. We also have fleet capacity. We work with about 150 different carriers in full truckload, less than truckload, and we also operate our own fleet out of Calgary, Montreal, and Toronto. I've been with the organization for a very short period of time of 33 years, and it's been a pleasure. Canadian Tire is a great organization. I've met so many beautiful people over the course of my career, and just like yourselves, networking has been a big portion of where I am today. My COVID story, communication. When you think about the network we're in, we think about the angst that we're all going through and the unknowns. What I have found, and I believe, and I've received feedback from the team, is better communication. We are communicating through Zoom or through our own network called Teams. And the team has told me we do an hour-long update with every single member of our team. And we make sure they understand the business, they understand service levels, and they understand what they're doing to it. So if I were to say a stock other than Canadian Tire stock, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to say that. Sorry, Jeff, don't cut me off. But I would say pharmaceutical, and for obvious reasons. Any kind of company that might have the capability to mass produce any kind of vaccines or anything to help with medications, I would say that watch those stocks. That's obviously for obvious reasons why we have to get on with that. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next panel.
Yeah, hi, Jeff, I'll just go ahead, okay? It's Dan Breslin with CN Rail. I've been here for 21 years, starting back in 1999 as an account manager on the domestic side of the house. I have held various roles inside of intermodal at CN for these last 21 years, and now I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing for all of the international and domestic, as well as our Asia team and our overseas team, as well as our supply chain team here in Toronto. I really have two things to share on a COVID story, and both relate to communication. When this first happened, the first dinner I had with my children and my wife, who all happen to be A-type personalities, was we're all going to have to learn how to respect each other, because this isn't going to go away anytime soon. So from that, I believe as a family, we've become better communicators with each other when we have issues. So that's been positive. The other piece is because I spend a lot of time on a plane and traveling, you know, I hadn't had the time to really connect with all of my team very well. And I've really been able to use the tools provided here to get to know all of my team members and connect with them on a different level and understand, you know, how they're doing and how things are going, and get to know them on a more personal level. So Ken took my stock to watch, which is anything in the biomedical industry or anything that's going to generate a vaccine. So, you know, I think I learned that Tesla is selling a lot of cars these days, more than many others. So I've got my eye on Tesla just because I think this gentleman is a genius, and he's only up to bigger and better things.
Sounds good. Thanks. Jordan, you want to go next?
Absolutely. So thanks, Jeff. So my name is Jordan Kafaz. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Intermodal and Autos at Canadian Pacific. I've been with CP for just over 3 years, and prior to that with the Port of Vancouver and Maersk Line. Always my entire career in transportation. So that's a little bit about me. COVID story. I think for me, the one thing, if you know, during the lockdown when nothing was open at all, at least in Toronto, I took the opportunity to do a little bit more you know, distant learning. So you know, learn a new skill, learn a new hobby. I always hated gardening, and I figured maybe if I get good at it, I might enjoy it. So take an online course about it, things like that. And I think I hope everyone took the opportunity of not being able to go out to dinner or go to a show to learn something new. So that was my COVID story. And then as far as a stock to watch, I might be a bit contrarian to what everyone else is going to say here, but I'm hedging a little bit, and I'm buying gold bullion ETFs. CGL is one of them. It holds gold bullion, and I just think it's a good insurance policy in this rather volatile time.
Hey, I would be checking that out right away after this event. Okay, next, Rob McDonald, go ahead.
Rob McDonald with Apps Transport. I'm founder and president of the company. Been here for, doing this for 35 years. We operate across Ontario, Alberta, and BC, and use two of the panelists for forwarding freight back and forth. COVID story. So a work-related one, I guess, would be the adaptability of our folks and how quickly we made changes to adapt to all of the COVID distancing, PPE requirements. And, everybody stepped up very quickly, and remarkably, we didn't miss a beat through the entire phase in of this and to this day. So I'd say adaptability was a really big factor in us being successful through this. Stock, maybe another contrarian. I'm a big believer in the Canadian banks. So you get paid to wait. They always get better. They never cut their dividends, except for one in Quebec. But everybody else has been running strong, and they're well capitalized. It's like putting money into a guaranteed investment certificate. So that's my pick.
Good. Okay, thanks, Rob. Al, take us on.
My name's Al Boughton. I'm the co-founder of Trailcon Leasing, which was started 28 years ago. I'm the dinosaur of the group, which Rob reminds me of frequently. I started in this in the trailer business in 1973. So I've been doing this for 47 years. I'm getting a little tired, but still having some fun with some of these guys on the screen too. So today I am not the president anymore. I stepped down a year ago, January, and go by the title as co-founder. And basically my role today is I'm doing what I've always done and being a bit of a rainmaker. So I'm the one who's looking after a number of the major accounts that we have. And we have people like Walmart, we look after from coast to coast every trailer, and we look after people like Loblaw, we do business with Home Depots, a lot of the big ones, and people like Rob McDonald, and Canadian Tire is a major customer of ours as well. So we've taken that business over. So I continue to work on the bigger accounts, and then I let the day-to-day stuff is handled by people a whole bunch smarter than me and with a better patience. COVID story, the first thing that I learned in the COVID story, if you're not wearing any pants, you need to be sitting down for the entire Zoom session that you're on. That's really important stuff. I've got better at fixing my computer. You know, things go wrong and I would just yell, and my executive assistant would get our guy to come in. So when things go wrong now, I'm getting good at it. I've also figured out how to shop on the internet, again, where I have a great executive assistant for 25 years, and she does everything for me, doesn't do anything anymore. So I've got pretty good at doing that. And stocks to watch, Rob stole mine to one, and I'm gonna give two. The bank stocks, I agree with Rob, in particular the Bank of Nova Scotia. Their stock was trading about $73 a share. It's down 32%, but it's paying a dividend of 6.46%. So if inflation's at 2%, let's say 2, and you get 6.46, then you've got your 4.5 points ahead of inflation. When you're a dinosaur, that stuff is important. The other one that I would look at, and that would be, you're not going to be able to time it. The vaccine comes, air travel is going to be increasing. That would be Air Canada. Their stock was at $52 on January the 20th. It went down to 12. It's at $16.24 as of yesterday. I think it's probably, as we go forward, is in the high 20s range, maybe 30. I don't see it back at 52, but if you're willing to wait a little and the vaccine comes, I think that would be a good stock for you.
Okay, well, as usual, from Al Bowden, we get not only an introduction, we get an investment strategy tips and tricks. So thank you, Al. Thanks to everybody for your intros. So this is how this is going to go. We've got 3 sections that we're going to go through. One is going to be called the warm-up. The warm-up is going to be called Fist to 5, which I'll explain in a moment. The second part of our discussion is going to be the tough questions. And the third is going to be the Q&A piece. So please hang in there. And I see that there are some questions on the Q&A already, so that's great. Please keep them coming. I'll be checking that and monitoring it so we can address your questions. Fist to 5, next section. So Fist to 5 is a technique that I learned in our business. It's a way to gain consensus or get feedback on a statement. So I'm going to make a statement. You can see the statement on the screen. I'm going to make a statement and ask the panelists to rank it 0. There we go. 0 if they don't agree with it at all. 5 if they wholeheartedly agree with the statement, or somewhere in between. So that's basically how this works. You'll catch on quickly. So statement number 1. It will take at least 2 years for economic activity to return to pre-pandemic levels. Fist to 5. Gents, what do you say? Okay, so Al and Dan are fully agreeing with that. It's going to take the full 2 years. Jordan's not so much, and then of course Rob and Ken kind of sit in the middle ground. So who wants to start? Dan, you know, you're saying it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have periods of fluctuation where we start numbers that look like 2019. But I have to qualify my 5 with, I think confidence is fully restored when everybody is vaccinated.
Okay, good. Al, quickly, what do you think?
When we had the meltdown in 2008, the Great Recession, In the United States, it was released that unemployment had returned, or employment had returned to normal in the United States in 2018. It took 10 full years for what was deemed to be the normal employment. I just see so many people who, I'm talking presidents and CEOs that I've talked to that are right sizing. And we'll talk a little bit about that maybe later, but right sizing. So I think the unemployment will be tough, and I think that will mean not as much economic growth. On the bright side, if we may come out of this better, because if you go to Canadian Tire, and Ken spent a lot of money at Canadian Tire in the last 4 months, there's a lot of product that you can't get your hands on because it's all sold out. They're doing well, so that's positive for the Canadian economy. But I am not optimistic about it. I think unemployment will be tough for the next few years as people right size.
Okay, Ken, as Canadian Tire has referenced, why don't you make a comment, and then we'll jump to the next question.
I don't think the world, personally, I don't think the world can handle 5 years. As a company, 5 years, that can make or break you. If you're a startup company, 5 years, you're deciding in or out. And countries, if we hear about the deficit, and certainly heard about the Canadian deficit, 5 years, where the heck will we be? So I personally think it's 3 years. I think the next year is about level setting. I think year 2 is about innovation and change. Companies, countries will learn and adapt. And then the 3rd year, things will start to kick in. I think as a human race, we need to have that. When you think of family and friends, schools and careers, we're going to all find new ways of doing that. I just think 5 years, I just think we're faster than that.
Good. I read a Fortune 500 survey of CEOs, very recent, who half of the surveyed CEOs stated that it would be Q1 of 2022 before we return to pre-pandemic levels. So about half of that grouping said it's another year and a half, folks, before we get to pre-pandemic levels. So let's queue up the next question here, and maybe get Rob and Jordan talking about it. Let's talk about business travel. Business travel will never return to pre-pandemic levels. Fist of 5, what do you gents think? So Ken's saying never. Rob's more optimistic. Maybe that's why he's buying Air Canada stock. And we've got 5s, 4s. Rob, why don't you start here?
Well, someone mentioned the 08, 09 and lingering recession from that period. At the beginning of that and going through it, a lot of the thought was that things would never be the same. And yes, it took a long time to get back to what was normal before, but things tend to, and I'm an optimist, so I find things tend to find their, middle ground. The pendulum swings one way or the other. This is kind of an odd kind of black swan event that, came out of nowhere. And I think once fixed, things will go back to the way they were. So my opinion, but that's what I see.
Jordan?
Yeah, I think companies have made structural changes that they've just gotten used to over the last 4 months of not having to travel nearly as much. And I think companies going forward will look at their bottom line and say, do we need to just say jump on a plane and go somewhere? If we're going to go see one person, is this type of platform good enough to accomplish what we? I think in many cases the answer is going to be yes. So I don't think it's going to go. I mean, it may take a long time to get back to where it was, but I think at least for the next 4 or 5 years, I think everyone's just going to say, like, they're going to question it. They're going to say, how did we get by without doing it before? And they'll figure out a way.
Yeah. Well, that same CEO survey of Fortune 500 CEOs, half of those CEOs said never returning back to normal, back to what we knew as normal. So that's their opinion. We will see how this thing plays out. Let's cue slide 7, please. And let's talk about networking. So the statement is, networking effectiveness remains one of the best ways to source new talent and create business and career opportunities. Fist of 5, do you agree? Everybody's on side here. All right, everybody agrees that this is networking effectiveness. So this is really speaking to how well we're adapting to the ability to network, because some of our traditional methods have changed. So Al, why don't we start with you?
You know what, 28 years ago when I started TrailCon, the first thing that I did was make sure that I got my membership of the Transportation Club moved from the company that I was president of to this new entity called TrailCon, who nobody knew anything about, including me. It will continue to be very, very important. And I think as we open up, I can't imagine what the first Transportation Club event's going to be like. You're going to sell out in about 20 minutes because it is so important. And if throughout this whole COVID thing, it's what I miss getting together with Rob McDonald's and his partner Brandon and seeing people. So it is so, so important. And you pick up those snippets of information and what's happening and doing that. It's just so important that we continue to do that. And TrailCon's success has been a big part of our success, the Transportation Club, the OTA, the CTA, the Toronto Trucking Association, all that. That's where we find out what's happening, and that's where we meet the people who make it happen. So it's really important.
Dan, I'd like you to weigh in on this topic. Partly because I know that you've traveled lots in your time at CN to the U.S., across Canada, connections all over the place, North America in particular. What does that look like? How do you network in the current environment, or even in the months at least to follow?
Well, when I think of the amount of travel that we do, and the fact that we have staff all over North America, and we have stakeholders, and we have partners that are all across Canada, it's absolutely imperative that you be face to face with them. So when you talk about whether there'll be travel or return to normal levels, I don't think it will ever. I think these tools are going to be able for us to connect a little bit better. But when I think about networking effectiveness and creating and finding talent, I get a lot of resumes all the time, whether they come from HR or from people who send them through to me. But I really believe that the people that I meet at the events, like the TTC events, the people that I meet, stakeholders, and the people that I meet through different customer venues and customer events and interactions is usually the people that I'm most interested in learning more about, and usually that's the best way that I connect with future potential candidates.
Thanks. Rob, maybe a brief comment on talent. I know you do with customers, but you're also focused very much on resourcing your operation with the right kind of people to replace you when you retire and replace the those that are moving on in age. Can you comment on this whole networking issue?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're buying from my company or wanting a job here, I mean, we're all humans. We deal with each other, and I think the most important thing is the cultural fit. So when you meet somebody that has the qualifications, and you meet them, and that there'll be a good cultural fit, there's going to be a lot less chance of trouble down the road, and they fit in and they become sort of the family group. So I've always looked at it that way, and I think the associations like the Toronto Transportation Club and others are fantastic ways to network and find people if you're looking for talent, and hopefully once in a blue moon find a customer in there too.
Good. Let's do our last fist to 5 statement. So if you could cue that, Carlos, please. So this relates to the topic of video meetings, much like what we are doing right now and today. So the statement being video meetings like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc., are just as effective for connecting with customers as in-person meetings. We've kind of already talked about some of this, but I really want to focus maybe on the customer piece. So fist of 5, what do you think? So very low, there's a 4. So Rob's saying they're very effective. They're pretty darn effective. And I think there was a 1 from Jordan. So Jordan, I think there was a 1 from Jordan. Can you comment on your opinion why that is?
Yeah, like I think my experience with these types of platforms is it works well for if you're maintaining relationships with people that you already know, that you've got a good base with. I think it's actually effective in that sense. I think our industry is very people oriented. It's relationships, and I think the only way you can develop that from fresh is to meet someone face to face. So you know, it's a challenge that we've all had. We've had to make this work, and it does to a degree. But I don't think you'll in this industry, transportation, I don't think you can ever replace the face to face meetings.
Okay, Ken, you want to weigh in on this one?
I agree. Nothing replaces the face-to-face. I do believe travel will be reduced. However, what it'll do is it'll make face-to-face meetings that much more critical. You'll have to sell your brand in a faster pace, yet you have to be that personal. It all can't be business. So I really think have an elevator speech ready, get your message ready, get your brand ready. And when you have that opportunity, because there's nothing like in a social event like the TTC has, you get to see a different side of the person and you make that connection, and it's through those face-to-face meetings I feel better, deeper connections are made.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of thoughts on this, and then we'll move forward to the tough questions. You know, as we've looked, you know, here at Bison, as we've looked at both the difficult, maybe the bad, and the good things that COVID has forced us to adopt and try and test out. You know, I would say video meetings and the effectiveness of them is one of those things I'd say, I hope some of that stays, because our level of engagement, I would say, with our customers has taken a dramatic step up. The ability to quickly connect in yes, it's not as good as sitting across a table and sharing lunch or a meal together, or being on a golf course, or across from each other in a conference room, but it's pretty good. And can our level of engagement with customers take that pronounced and sustainable step increase and complement that with maybe less frequent, but those opportunities to be in person for a little more of the social factor. So that's some of the thoughts that we've got on it. Is some of this I think really does make sense to continue to maintain. So I want to move to step 2 or phase 2 of this discussion, where we get into some of the more difficult or challenging questions. So and they're topical. So we'll start with remote work. So we're talking about remote work strategies, and so the question really is, how has your organization adapted to remote work that's been forced on us by this pandemic? Can you describe some key challenges, some learnings? Post-pandemic, what is your return to work strategy, or do you have one? And has the traditional office environment that most of us would remember and know, has that become effectively a thing of the past or not? So, you know, I queued up Jordan and Al to maybe touch on this, and then anybody else that wants to. So maybe Jordan at CP, what could you say about that at this stage? And we'll switch to Al.
Yeah, so I think we adopted, like most companies, fairly quickly. Once this really started to pick up, you know, decision was made pretty swiftly. First, it was to reduce staffing in the office, and then it was just to eliminate all non-essential workers from our office. And essential would it be, in our case, people that we need in the office to make sure that the railroad keeps moving 24 hours a day. And so, our sales and marketing team, who a lot already worked from home many days of the week, were permanently based out of home. And so, I think we adapted pretty quickly. But what then happened was the realization that you don't have that same level of instant interaction that you would normally have in the office. And I think that was a challenge at the start. You're so used to just walking over to someone's desk and saying, hey, let's get together quickly, huddle up for 5 minutes, solve a problem, and then you keep going, or you pull in a few different people. And I think that posed a bit of a challenge, because it takes longer to get small things done, is how I feel. It takes more phone calls. It's maybe a Zoom call or a conference call. And so you find yourself, instead of just having a face-to-face quickly, you find yourself doing a lot more calls to get the same thing done. And so, if you ask me for my personal opinion, I look forward to the day that everyone's back in the office, so that we can have that quick response, the quick brainstorming, the exchanging of ideas that I think it takes place more naturally in a face-to-face environment versus over a video platform. But the other side of it too is again, just like with customers, I think this type of platform is here to stay. I think there will be, when you're talking with colleagues in other parts of the country or the continent or the world, instead of a phone call, it's now going to be the best thing that you can get, absence of being face to face, is to do something like this where you're over video with each other. And so I do see this sticking around. But I don't think, from my perspective, that the traditional office environment is a thing of the past. I think it will always be there. I think it might look a little bit differently, but I think the need for exchanging ideas and the personal interaction is always going to be there.
Thanks, Jordan. Al, had you got a couple of thoughts on this too?
When every Tuesday morning we would have a sales meeting. So the people from Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Cornwall, and all that, we, video conferencing. So all the head office people were in the boardroom, and then we set up video conferencing. And we didn't do that until maybe, I'm going to say a year ago, something like that. Before they were just on the speakerphone. So we did that, and then as this happened, instead of a bunch of us in the boardroom, you've got now everybody's doing this. We're all on Zoom, and we've got the split screens, and we do it. So we were really well prepared to have those meetings. We just have a whole bunch more of them. We do business continuity plan Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sales meetings on Tuesday. We have IT meetings, and they're all scheduled. So everybody's on there. We were really well prepared for it. Our technicians don't have to see anybody, which was great because everything is done by tablet, very similar to what you see in FedEx. So all our guys have that. So if we're at Canadian Tire, we just send that information through what Canadian Tire unit needs, a safety or an A-check or whatever. So what we did is we made sure that none of our people saw or touched other people, even picking parts up, that type of thing. So we adapted very, very quickly. We have lots of workstations where people are side by side. So what we do is we split them in days. So my wife works at TrailCon, and the gal that's beside her. So Wendy would come in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and she's there Tuesday, Thursday, and the rest of the time do it remotely. So we adapted very quickly. I don't like it, but we did do it. Our back to work strategy, we will go back, and we've targeted the 13th of September to get it in, and then all rotating until we can have everybody in. So we'll rotate. So basically 50% of the people will be in. All the big screens are already up, separating people in the offices. We have thermometer readers and every entrance. Everybody has to sign in. There's all that stuff. So we're ready to go. As far as the traditional office environment disappearing, not ever in my world. And TrailCon is and guys on the screen, and I think lots of people who are listening know we're a very social company, and we have lots of fun, and there's a little level of silliness and lunacy and going in and yucking it up with the staff and having all that. We will not abandon that. We'll just again, this has been tied to the vaccine and all that other stuff. So we will be back in September.
I think Al just touched on a critical piece that I don't necessarily have a key question on, but he's talking about culture, right? Is the culture of our companies is made up of the people that are there and what they contribute to that culture, and of course the leadership and how they behave. So in a remote work scenario, that changes, right? That changes a lot. You know, I had from that same CEO survey, not to overplay it here, but 25% of CEOs that surveyed said the workforce will never 100% return to the office. Like, it's going to look different in their opinion. Now, the majority still is kind of in Al's camp, saying, I think it's going to come back, and the benefits of collaboration, the office environment, and the culture, and the friendships, and what comes out of that. There's so much value there. You know, we'd like to get that back as soon as we can safely do so. So,
yeah, and Jeff, can I just add to that? So, you know what? With so many women in the workforce today, and we have many, 50% of our staff is women. We had already made that technological investment for what I call them snow days. You know, you get a snow day, and the gal who's running accounts payable, the bus doesn't come to take the kids. Guess what? She's not coming to work. So we were investing in that. So when you say for that survey of the 25%, I agree. But what it will allow us to do, and us, I say all of us who are in this environment, it will allow us all to get productivity out of our people who aren't in the office. When they stayed at home and at the snow days, you got some work. You didn't get the work that you get now because we're all set up for it.
okay, well, just keeping my eye on the time here, I want to allow some Q&A. I noticed that there's a few questions that are being put into the chat. I would encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A section or link that's in your on your screen. But I am trying to watch both. Let's move to question 2, and Ken, I'm going to ask you, Ken, then Rob to comment specifically, and then whoever else wants to add. So this is about transportation networks. You know, there's been complete disruption. Let's face it, as you know, COVID hit North America and the world. Complete disruption. Things were happening. We had some companies surging, others completely shutting down, and networks were suddenly imbalanced. Now that we've gone through what feels like forever, but it's been about 4 months of this, what changes are you seeing in transportation networks? Are there some fundamental shifts that are occurring in the supply chain that we need to be all aware of? Are there capacity challenges? Are there some regional market issues that are part of the bigger issue? And what about driver and equipment supply? So starting with you, Ken, and then maybe Rob, a comment or two.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. I'll break it into the 3 parts you outlined there, Jeff. I'll talk about the transportation networks. Typically, we see the capacity and the availability of carrier shift over time, and sometimes that could take six to 1 year time frame, and that really sort of flows with the economy. Now, with the COVID crisis, you took that down to a month. So I would say in late 2019, we did see some more capacity coming back because there had been many years, 2017, 2018, very tight years for at least Canadian Tire for carriers and capacity. So I see a number of carriers now shifting, and a lot of that has to do with the shift in flow of goods. And we're definitely seeing that shift in flow of goods. Now, do I see this continuing? No. We got to remember, ELDs are coming in June of 2021. We still have a driver crisis that is looming and is in the midst of it. So I do see carrier capacity slowing down over the course of the next year to 2. Short term, I see a lot of organizations, especially Canadian Tire, going to larger equipment. We're testing a 60-foot container presently. I do see us doing more LCV work and looking at a lot of our transportation companies working with the government officials and expanding the LCV capabilities right across the country. Long term, I see, and this might be happening sooner than we would think, is autonomous vehicles for both the long haul and the short haul. When I think about moving freight over long distance, I see it for both truck and rail. In autonomous vehicles. When I think about supply chain, Wow. Typically in times of bad, Canadian Tire just blows up and it excels, and it's true. When I think about Alberta, BC, Ontario, Quebec, we're in double-digit growth, and I'm not talking 10, I'm not talking 20, I'm talking 30, 40, 50 growth in the fact that customers, their demand is putting so much strain from raw material right through to the retail floor. So the problem is we just cannot move fast enough. So what I see in our network is we're optimizing everything we can. We're reaching out to all of our partners that we rely on heavily, and we're seeing what they can do, what kind of workload they can take for us to get back the capacity, because we have a lot of sales sitting in the queue that we're not able to ship. Most predominantly our transportation, the companies that are working with us are doing an outstanding job. So we have lots of capacity, which is a great thing for both the inbound and the outbound. And that's with our rail providers. They're doing outstanding, along with the ocean freight carriers. That's really good. When I think about drivers and equipment, as inventory levels shift, what I would say is both, it's always a balancing act. And we are seeing, because Canadian Tire typically had touch freight, and there were carriers that would stay away from our type of freight, but with the COVID crisis and the interaction, we've moved away from that, and that's definitely opening the doors to companies that we work with. What I would say is it's also allowing us to optimize driver's time. When you think about that asset, when you put the hourly wage of a driver, when you put an hourly wage of the equipment, it nowhere compares to somebody that could do that general labor of moving product off. So making our drivers more effective in both their time and capacity has really helped us. And then, as I mentioned, we're really getting innovative with our 60-foot containers, LCVs. We're optimizing those as best as we can. And right now, over the next few weeks, over the next few months, as we stabilize demand, I think we'll just definitely make those programs even more and more as we begin to optimize our freight hauls with our carrier partners as well as with our fleet.
Thanks, Ken. Good insights there, Rob. Maybe jump in, and then I've got a question in the queue that I'm going to jump into right away. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious, from a transportation standpoint, the obvious change was, sudden and immediate in March, where retail shut and the restaurants and bars closed. It was a bit depressing, but the that sudden change in traffic flows, took a while to adapt to, but as all of us sitting here today did, we adapted quickly. The things we're seeing today, sort of I won't say post-COVID, but during COVID or during the sort of leveling off of COVID, is for us to do the same delivery we did before on a per stop basis is taking much longer, because there's all kinds of protective distancing going on. The guys have to go in with equipment. So the costs of doing a delivery that pre-COVID and post-COVID are different. And at some point, I guess that's going to be picked up in the costs and the rates to those using our services. So we will see. Our volumes, and this is kind of an odd component of this for us anyway, all of our customers have come back online, but the institutional food guys that do servicing of the bars and restaurants and so on, they're still way down. And all our other customers are at or above last year's peak level. So we're seeing a lot of, now it may be a surge in requirement, but we're seeing a lot of activity with the customers that kind of started coming out of the crisis, with the exception of the bars and restaurant suppliers. And they are now predicting it'll be the balance of this year till they get to normal. That'll be, of course, for Ontario and the rest of Canada. It'll be as we roll out the stage 2, 3, and 4 and on that we'll see that come back. But I'm very optimistic on the future volumes that we're seeing. One of the things we touched on, drivers and capacity challenges and so on. We are getting some problems with the low, the sort of more basic job functions such as dock workers with the CERB benefit. That a lot of guys are not that anxious to come in and work in 32-degree heat when they can stay home and get a reasonable return for doing nothing. So that's caused a bit of challenge. It's going to come to an end so that we see a sort of light at the end of that tunnel. Other than that, equipment, power equipment is readily available. Trailers are virtually impossible to come by because of the amount of, as Ken pointed out, the amount of stuff that's caught in the pipeline is sitting on trailers, and Al's smiling because he's a beneficiary of that fact. So trailers are tough to get. A good thing is we've been getting more and better quality drivers over the last month or so. So I guess as other companies are no longer there or just can't get it going fast enough, drivers can't survive on working 20, 30 hours a week. So we're getting a little more driver response to our requests for new guys. So that's on that.
Okay, well, that's good. I think we should hear from one of the railways on this, and so maybe Dan, I'll pose this to you, maybe just to talk a bit about the transportation networks as I've described, but I'll add to it a question that was in the queue, and it is states the following: what are the 2 things we should look towards as indicators of a strong economy in this time of uncertainty? Are there 2 things? There's probably multiple things, but transportation is often a leading indicator of what's going to happen down the road, right? So, what's CN's take on this and yours?
So on the networks, I think the big things that we're seeing from a network side is the fluctuation on imports and exports coming through the ports. We're seeing a group of customers on the international side that are really managing their capacity tightly, which, as you know, most international freight becomes a domestic piece of freight at some point. So we're really watching a lot of fluctuation there. Getting to your question on indicators, I watch the unemployment stats, and really I spend the most of my time looking at what's happening in the US as our biggest trading partner. And, I'm also, watching the amount of infections and things happening down there now. And that I really, to me, that's the leading indicator to me of whether we're doing well or not doing well. When infections were going down, we just got some good job numbers out of the US that had dropped a little bit. I get a little more hope. And so I really am impressed with the job that we are doing here in Canada in order to make sure that we stay healthy and do the things we need to do in order to be ready to go when the time is right. So unemployment numbers and really looking at rail transportation as an indicator, total rail, not just what CN does, but total rail in North America, really watching the numbers on the container side and on the carload side.
Okay. Volume and activity. Yeah. Okay, good. Why don't we move to question 3, and I might make this the last formal question, and then try to jump into some Q&A because some of the questions are mounting up here. So I want to talk a bit about future challenges, and of course we've talked a little bit about this already. But what is keeping you up at night? Like when you think, besides insomnia, when you think of the balance of 2020, 2021, what are the top concerns that worry you? And what do you think it's going to take to overcome those headwinds, deal with those challenges? So let's go. Al, why don't you jump in on this? Jordan, I'll ask you to weigh in here as well, and then whoever else wants to join in.
I'll tell you what really keeps me up at night, and it's there's a very useful website that you can go on. It's called generationscrewed.ca, and on that it shows there's a debt clock, and then you click on your province, and it will show you what you owe. So as of today, all of you Ontarians, you owe $21,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. You owe $24,000 on the provincial debt. So each of you owes $45,000. Now that was before all this $250 billion spend on CERP and all those other things. So the debt, I just don't know where the debt's going to go. We have a prime minister whose claim to fame was his assistant drama teacher or something. Oh, a whitewater instructor, and we've got this incredible debt. And what are we going to do? How are we going to pay it back? Today, he said, we borrowed the money so you didn't have to, so Canadians didn't have to. Here's a news flash. It's our money. It's our money. It's not their money. It's our money. I don't know where this money's going to come from to pay it back. And you know what keeps me up at night is I'm sitting on the rocking chair of the old folks home, and one of my grandkids comes over and kicks the snot out of me for leaving the country, and so it's a mess. Because if we don't get this in order and start to be responsible, you know what? 45,000 is going to be 145,000 for every man, woman, and child. Today, the debt service on that at 3% is $1,350 a year. If interest rates went to 8%, if the prime rate was that, it would be $3,600 a year, every man, woman, and child. How about in 1981 and 82, when the prime lending rate was 22.75%, for those of you who are around? That would mean the debt service would be $10,000 for every man, woman, and child, just the interest on the debt if it was flat today at $45,000. So that really keeps me up at night, because I think we are just mortgaging our children's, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren's future. And this newest spend is very alarming for me. So that's what keeps me up.
Okay, well, we all knew that ultimately Al would get to the politics of the matter. And thank you for taking us there. Jordan, why don't you weigh in on this topic? What do you think about the future challenges? Are you sleeping good or not so much?
Well, I think one of the, just in the midst of all this uncertainty, I mean, it is hard to get sleep when there's so much volatility one day to the next. There's good news, there's bad news. There's signs of hope, and then there's signs of doom and gloom. And it's hard to know which way to think, which way to go, frankly. And so I think for me, it's really that volatility. It's that, how do you know what news to believe? How do you know what statistics to believe as indicators? If you had gone to sleep on January 1 and woke up today and you looked at your stock portfolio, you'd probably go like, oh, okay, little blip, not bad. But it's so disconnected from reality that it's hard to tell. So what do you believe? So I think for me, it's the volatility, and then I just you wake up being an optimist and hoping for good news, and you don't get it every day. And so yeah, I think that's the big thing for me is volatility, and that volatility then translates into forecasting. It translates into what's going to happen next month, the next 3 months, the next 6 months, next year. And that makes, I think that makes life difficult for any business that's trying to plan ahead.
Good comments there, folks. I see a trend in the Q&A. I'd like to maybe talk a bit about drivers and small carriers and what the current state is there. So there's a question. So there's two questions that are driver and small carrier related. One reads something like this. There's been lots of challenges for large companies, no doubt smaller companies, and I believe that the person asking the question is asking about carriers. smaller carriers, how do they compete in this marketplace? How vulnerable are they? And what would be a good strategy for a smaller carrier to deal with things? So that's one part of the question. And then Dan mentioned driver shortage, and so the other question, part two of drivers, is, are trucking companies looking for drivers with less Canadian experience? And maybe just a couple of comments from the group on just driver supply in general. So who would want to start there? I'll kind of open it up. Rob, you employ a lot of drivers. So do you, Ken, on the private fleet. Rob, you wanna chat about that piece?
Well, maybe on the first part of the question, which was about, if you're a smaller carrier, what can you do to, ensure viability, I guess, in the long and the short term. One of the key components of running a trucking company is your safety record. And I think, that goes hand in hand with your insurance rates. So I think it all starts with how you hire and who you hire and the process you go through. You could never put enough effort into screening and testing and understanding who you're putting behind that $100,000, $150,000 asset and putting it on the roads amongst the public. So I think as a small carrier, or as any carrier for that matter, and I know Bison, of course, you guys are on the same page. That is critical to being able to run your business and stay in business. So I would say the driver screening, hiring is super important. And then just sort of the record keeping of that and the monitoring and ongoing safety of your fleet.
Okay, good. Ken, what do you think?
Rob had a lot of excellent points. If I could also add to that, is I think you have to think long-term, not short-term. Short-term, as a small carrier, you're going to maybe cut costs and do all those things that are counterintuitive to running a stable company. What you need to do is think longer term, because you're only as good as your reputation. And if you have a bad reputation for service, say you have a good reputation for cost, but a terrible reputation for service and everything, it's all interconnected. So you have to look at that long-term brand solution of who you are and what you bring to the table. And I know for Canadian Tire, there are companies that are now a lot larger companies that they came to us as just a few trucks, and we typically don't go down to that level. However, there are in some niche markets where individuals have got in and they've kept a great balance of service and cost and of course safety, because everything has to do with brand. So the more that you look at the extension of your company and how you treat the brands that you haul is a big differentiator, because so many people swoop in, undercut everyone, and for larger organizations, we see that, and we don't want to deal with that. We do a lot more due diligence with those smaller companies, and so that's how you would differentiate yourself. And then once you open that door, you want to stay in there. And so that's why I really think you got to look long term. Don't leverage yourself too much, and then do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, maybe I would add from some of our experiences here that those companies, the most successful companies, this is based on data from previous recessions, the most successful companies that emerge well, the best out of a recessionary period, are those that balance well the cost-cutting, attention to detail on spend and cost and discretionary spends like that with investment, right? Investing in people, equipment, and if you are too heavily weighted in one area and you say, okay, let's be opportunistic and go during a recessionary period, you are less likely to emerge well than if you have a more balanced approach. And the same can be said about too much cost cutting, as I think, Ken, you're referring to. And maybe lastly on smaller carriers, I'd pitch that smaller carriers, align yourselves with good partners, and whether that's a larger tier 1 type carrier that has a need for capacity and logistics, or the right type of customer. Some customers are more difficult to transact with just because of their requirements, and some are such as, no offense, Canadian Tire, but Canadian Tire, is not every carrier is going to meet your individual requirements to transact work. And a carrier like Bison can work with other smaller carriers to enable those carriers to be part of that. Other comments on driver supply shortage? Is there really one? That question was in there. Does anybody want to take that?
I'd just like, Jeff, just to add, in the early days, so back in 1985 when I started the company, one of the critical components to our success in learning what to do in the industry was joining associations like the TTC. You get a wealth of knowledge. There's no book out there that says this is what you should do. There are rules and there are laws, but there are right and wrong ways to do things and ways to avoid pitfalls. And there's no better way than communicating with people that have already done it and maybe made those mistakes. So a huge help for any carrier starting up or continuing is to network with other people in the industry that have seen and done what you do.
Very good point. Anything else on those topics? We've got through some of the questions, not quite all. I did see one talking specifically about the challenge of school, and if schools don't open or reopen, I should say, in September, how does one adapt? So that's maybe back to the remote work question. So I don't know if anybody's got wants to address that. If you've got staff that would be forced to stay home, much as they've done in recent months, just on that topic.
Hey Jeff, so I can speak from my own personal experience. I've got a 3.5-year-old son, and with daycares being closed, trying to manage a 3.5-year-old while also getting work done is an incredibly difficult task for anybody, and no matter what job you're in. And thankfully daycares have reopened, some of them at least, and his has. Otherwise, he'd probably be sitting in my lap with me while I'm doing this call. I think it's going to be it seems like schools are going to reopen, at least in Ontario, but maybe not full time. And I think everyone's going to have to just be flexible to the reality. The concern, just me as a citizen, and for the concern for the economy is, hopefully we don't get to the point where we create a society where either you have to choose to be a parent or an employee. And so I think it's critical that schools reopen and that kids have somewhere to go every day while their parents can go work and help keep the economy moving. It's my closest political as I'm going to get, I think, on this one.
Okay, sounds good. There's a couple other good questions that have popped up that I think are really awesome. So there's a question related to e-commerce and last mile delivery. Is COVID-19 the growth opportunity for that aspect of the supply chain? So really talking about online commerce, shopping, fulfillment, last mile delivery. What does that look like? Maybe Dan, could you maybe touch a little bit on that topic? You guys deal with a lot of retailers, large ones. What do you hear? What do you see? And what do you think?
Well, it certainly has at my house. And having 2 teenagers, university students that are very, very quick at adapting to purchase things online because they can't go to the mall. It's definitely something that's happened in our house. And I'm not a big online shopper myself, but it's I kind of relay it to the same way that I've adapted to these online tools like we're doing today with Zoom or Teams or all these other things that I've been able to adapt to that I think are going to just absolutely change the way we do business for the future. And as someone said, there's no replacement for a face-to-face meeting. That's very true. But 20% or 30% of my meetings can definitely be replaced with these tools. So, my opinion is that this only grows. This segment only grows. And it's in all of our best interests to make sure that we are, figuring out within our companies how we can learn to play more in that space.
Yeah, yeah, Jeff, if I could add to what Dan's saying there is try to find a courier company. Right now, good luck. They are keeping their best customers and dropping their least preferred customers. Canadian Tire, an example, 5,000 orders a day. We were processing through all our banners. In a matter of 3 weeks, it's 80,000 in one day. And so what we have found, and it's very similar to supply chains, is the courier, the final mile, and the courier companies they are working 7 days, and they're trying to find an 8th day if they could, or a 9th day if they could, because they are really struggling, and they're asking companies to help them, like Canadian Tire, and I'm sure other companies here on the table. They're asking us to pre-position freight for them, help them out in any means to get that product closer to their terminal so they can process it. So if you have not had a good courier relationship, it's a very tough environment to hook into one that will give you the service and commitment you may need.
Hey, Ken, I think what is happening that I think is strong from the Canadian Tire standpoint is the pickup, the pickup at the store, and being able to order a whole bunch of things at once. You get an email with your date and time, and you show up with this. To me, that's something I think that's also going to take off. That's going to have drive-through windows at Canadian Tire stores, maybe. I don't know, but I think that's also going to take off as well.
Yeah.
Al, go ahead.
I just because my executive assistant's an Amazon fan, I was a huge Amazon fan, and anytime I wanted anything, I just bark at her, and she'd order it, and it would come in a few days. Those days of me shopping on Amazon, they're now down at 3rd and 4th for me, because I can tell you, Canadian Tire and Home Depot have been absolutely outstanding on ordering, and that's what my wife and we do it. The other thing is you got people like Home Depot who deliver right to your house for exactly the same price you buy at the store. And the people who are delivering, they're not coming in a van or with a name on the side of it that says so-and-so courier. These are people in private cars that are coming up. I have deliveries to the house every day, so there's a lot of people who are being employed by it. But I say this to you, Ken, Canadian Tire's been outstanding. You did a great job with it, and Home Depot has been really good as well. Those are the 2 sites I use now. So I think we're all going to change a little bit. Why would I bother wandering around the store when I can just go online, pick 4, 5, 6, 8 items? I pick it up in Orangeville, and the orders are 100% have been. So 4 months, every one of the orders has been 100%. So I think we're going to see a real change in that because it's so convenient.
Yeah, Al, sorry, great points, and thank you. The check's in the mail for that. There's a company in the UK called Tesco. Tesco is like a grocery store chain, and what they did is they moved their stores to it's sort of hardware and grocery, and they moved majority of their stores to an online fulfillment center. And so they've gone full gambit. They moved to online, and now they're moving back. I believe it's about a balance, because people might say, well, you're concerned about bricks and mortar. And bricks and mortar, it seems Canadians, we're very social beings. We want to get out. So there is a place for bricks and mortar. What that would look like, it may change the way the stores are even set up, just the same way that businesses will set themselves up. Because you're right, it's much more convenient to pick up. It's much more convenient to have that delivered. And it's a gender thing, and not to call the gender card out, but there's certain people that it's a social thing to go out and do that. And for other people, they need to touch it and feel it. And other people, they're totally fine to bringing it in. And of course, all the returns that go with that. So it's quite unique.
So, and I would think for you, Ken, and anybody else in the business, reverse logistics is going to be an awfully big part of what's happened with these returns. When you order something and then you get it's a lot different than the store, right? That's where you're going to get returns. So,
oh yeah.
You know, we're getting close to our time here, folks. So I'm gonna say there's be one more question that we can address, and then I'll wind things up and continue to say thank you to everybody that's participating. So Rob McDonald mentioned something earlier where he talked about the transportation cost, the actual cost, the cost to get the work done. Rob, you mentioned that, as I'm sure you recall, that it's gone up as a result of all the PPE and the restrictions and all that being involved. Is there any sort of technology play that helps mitigate some of that cost? Is there a new way to deliver the goods? Is there could we remove the paperwork, the traditional paperwork process? I'm a fan of this, by the way. Remove the traditional paperwork process where driver and shipper or receiver exchange a piece of paper, John Henry it, like something like that. Is there a way that we can get technology to work for us to drive minutes, valuable minutes, and maybe hours out of the transportation process? So I'll throw that out there to anybody that wants to take a crack at it.
I can try a crack at that. So in January, while COVID was just sort of brewing on the horizon, we instituted a handheld mobile P&D app. We immediately saw all kinds of benefits, namely efficiency. Along with the efficiency was the ability to track time at a customer, time you arrived, time you got in the door, time you finished unloading. And we're able to provide the customers real-time information, and it also gives us the data to do the analysis, so that when we look at a customer, we say, well, you know, last year was an hour per delivery, it's now an hour and a half. You've got some concrete data to go back and talk to them about. And then the other part you mentioned about the touch-free component, that is already part of that process, because the driver can go, they can either just tap the screen, the driver can do it for them. It fires them off an email with a POD saying, delivered to Fred on, Tuesday or whatever it is. So yes, the technology has helped us immensely. I mean, our margins on our Ontario operation went up almost 10%, our gross margin, because of efficiency and being able to track the real time and understanding what we were doing with the fleet. And then also that efficiency led to being able to use up capacity that we didn't even know we had. So yeah, technology is a huge part of the operation, and going forward, it will only help navigate through the whole COVID pandemic as it winds down, hopefully.
Any other comments on that topic? Technology opportunities.
Yeah, I believe there's a lot of technology providers that are out there that they've been on this for a while, even pre-COVID. Because it is such a time savings. A simple thing, we had a manual handing out of key process before COVID, and we bought a new system and integrated. And so what it is a card system. You take your card, you swipe it onto this system, it opens a door and it dispenses the key. So all of a sudden now it's a book on and a book off system. So there's many things out there. You just have to research them, and they've been in the works for a long time, and it is quite a cost savings when you start handing or limiting those touch points, because those touch points sometimes could be like just a general good conversation and takes time, or it could be a bad interaction. So by minimizing that between drivers and vendors and customers is a great thing. And it also really helps to make sure that everything's done the proper way, because a lot of these systems almost have like a step 1, step 2, step 3. So you've got to go through that sequencing to get things done. So it really helps, and people don't worry about it, because some people are more intent on certain aspects of what they do. And a lot of people, when it comes to paperwork, just can't be bothered. So it's very helpful with the new technology.
The one thing that I like to remind my millennial children is that if you got it, a truck brought it, and it's a words to live by. And any one of you can feel free to quote me on that. All right. I think what I'll do at this stage is I'm going to draw us to a close, and we still have close to 100 of people listening in. First off, this feels like it's been quite a successful event in terms of discussing some of the new normal. How have we had to adapt and pivot, or whatever word you want to describe the change that has had to occur, forced upon us in terms of an organization like the Toronto Transportation Club, what that looks like, and how does a networking club become relevant in a world like we find ourselves in. In the same way, each one of us as individuals within our businesses, how do we pivot and adapt? Great dialogue. I specifically would like to thank you, Ken, Rob, Jordan, Dan, Al, for being willing to share your perspective. And this was not intended, and nor was it a commercial for our businesses, but rather we are part of a transportation industry, and part of the, all of you are part of our club, which is a very large and continues to grow club. We want to be willing and able. We are able, so let's be willing to share best practices, things that we do, things that we know, perspectives we can offer, so we can elevate the entire industry. So with that, I'll just say thank you once again also to our participants for logging in. If you have feedback as participants, please direct it. I believe there will be an opportunity to direct that to us through the Toronto Transportation Club. The contact us is likely the logical place for that. We would love to hear from you, what we could do better, things that you liked, things that you didn't like, because we'd like to do this again in order to continue the dialogue, keep learning, and staying connected. Those are the two things that I think we've accomplished today, but it can't just stay at today. We got to keep it up. So with that, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you once again, and all the best. Stay safe.